At this very moment, your gut is home to roughly 39 trillion microorganisms. That is more living creatures inside your body right now than there are stars in the entire Milky Way galaxy. This visualization compares a densely populated ancestral microbiome on the left to a depleted modern one on the right. Consensus estimates that up to 40% of the bacterial species that once thrived inside our ancestors' intestines have vanished entirely from ours. These missing microbes were the silent engineers of your health. They manufactured critical B vitamins and produced over 90% of the serotonin your brain depends on to regulate mood, sleep, and appetite. We are witnessing a mass internal extinction, the quiet removal of the primary organisms responsible for human biological stability. Healthy microbes constantly reinforce a thin mucus barrier along your intestinal wall. Without them, this critical defense begins to severely thin out. In this cross-section of the gut wall, we see the immediate danger. Bacterial fragments called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, slip through the weakened barrier into the bloodstream. The body responds with a quiet, low-grade inflammation that builds chronically without producing a single warning sign. These microbes also provide the signals the immune system needs to distinguish between a threat and your own tissue. Deprived of those signals and subjected to constant inflammation, the body faces a climbing risk for severe metabolic disease, widespread autoimmune disruption, and accelerated cognitive decline. In the rugged mountains of the Caucasus region, a fermented drink has survived more than 2,000 years of human history. This culture was passed from hand to hand and family to family across millennia in an unbroken chain. That drink is kefir. A single cup delivers over 60 distinct strains of beneficial bacteria and yeast living together in a dense community. This chart compares that diversity to modern standards. Kefir contains 5 to 10 times the microbial variety found in the most expensive probiotic supplements on the market. Kefir provides a massive, living ecological community, rather than the isolated strains found in synthetic pills. Fermenting kefir requires a kefir grain, a living, rubbery, cauliflower-shaped structure. Despite decades of research and mapping its exact DNA profile, no laboratory has ever successfully assembled these organisms into a functioning kefir grain from scratch. Every functioning grain in use today is a living descendant of those original, mysterious ancient cultures. Because science cannot artificially manufacture this complex biological structure, introducing it into the modern gut is a unique, unreplicable evolutionary event. We can track these living organisms from the exact moment they are swallowed and begin their downward descent. The diverse community enters a microscopic battle for survival as it plunges into the extreme hydrochloric acid bath of the stomach. Surviving organisms push past the stomach to navigate the highly competitive and shifting landscape of the small intestine. This is a specialized biological deployment where microbes must survive extreme conditions to reach their ultimate destination. The survivors finally arrive deep inside the dark, oxygen-free environment of the large intestine. They begin aggressively occupying territory and consuming resources, effectively starving out the opportunistic invaders that dominate the modern gut. In this cellular view, microbes break down dietary fiber into short-chain fatty acids, the primary energy source for cells lining your colon wall. Within 72 hours, this molecular shift physically reinforces the thin mucus barrier, stopping the leakage of toxins into the blood. A daily routine of kefir moves beyond simple nutrition. It restores the microbial diversity and physical integrity required for the gut to act as a primary regulator of immune function. The moment kefir reaches your stomach, it enters one of the most hostile environments in the human body. This visualization shows the challenge. Your stomach maintains a pH between 1.5 and 3.5, strong enough to dissolve metal. In these conditions, most commercial probiotic strains suffer a devastating die-off, losing 90% of their viable organisms. Their cell walls rupture and their internal machinery disintegrates. The journey ends right here. Kefir operates differently. The bacteria and yeast within it do not exist as isolated, free-floating organisms. Instead, they live inside a dense, three-dimensional matrix called kefiran. Produced during fermentation, this structural lattice envelops the microbial colonies. Dissolving into the liquid, it coats the microorganisms in a protective biological shield. pre-adapting them to tumble through the acid bath structurally intact. This structural preparation is what separates kefir from standard supplements. The microbes arrive at the intestine already battle-hardened, making their survival a mechanical certainty. After surviving the stomach, these billions of organisms spill into the duodenum, the first section of your small intestine. The environment here is different, but no less challenging. The microbes must now navigate pancreatic enzymes and bile salts, and a resident microbiome that is fiercely territorial. Normally, native bacteria guard their space. They produce antimicrobial compounds and use quorum-sensing factors to coordinate an attack against invaders. But multiple strains of lactobacillus found in kefir have the ability to calm this local immune environment rather than provoking a fight. This diagram maps the interaction. The kefir organisms communicate with specialized dendritic cells embedded in the gut wall, sending signals that bypass the usual alarm system. Instead of triggering inflammation, this promotes IgA, a protective antibody that strengthens mucosal defenses while keeping the immune system quiet. This biological diplomacy is how kefir bypasses the body's immune gates. It is quietly welcomed through the entrance rather than being treated as a threat. 12 hours into the journey, the microbes reach the large intestine. Here, they begin fermenting dietary fiber and complex sugars. This fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids, including a critical molecule called butyrate. Butyrate is the primary energy source for your intestinal lining. Without it, the junctions between your cells loosen, creating gaps that allow bacterial fragments, or LPS molecules, to leak through into your bloodstream, driving systemic inflammation. When these cells absorb butyrate, they gain the energy needed to maintain those tight junctions. This physically seals the intestinal barrier, keeping it intact like a well-maintained brick wall. By fueling this mechanical repair, the fermentation process stops the leakage of inflammatory markers at the source. Within 72 hours of a single serving, the microbial diversity in the large intestine begins to expand. The kefir organisms themselves do not stay forever. They are simply transient visitors that pass right through the system. However, while they are present, they alter the local pH, produce peptides that suppress pathogens, and generate metabolic byproducts that feed beneficial species, always feeding relationships, where the metabolic output of the kefir microbes provides the exact nutrients needed by other helpful bacteria. This process wakes up beneficial species that were previously outnumbered or suppressed. Kefir changes the environment enough to allow your native ecosystem to recover and grow. When this cycle is maintained for a full month, the reduction in systemic inflammation begins to impact other systems. With the intestinal barrier sealed and fewer inflammatory fragments reaching the bloodstream, the body's immune stress lowers, a shift that research has linked to clearer skin and more stable brain chemistry. This reveals the true function of the liquid. It acts as a transient biological shield that enters the system, repairs the environment, and then departs, leaving a reinforced and diverse native microbiome behind. Consume kefir daily for 30 days, and the internal ecosystem of your microbiome physically and measurably alters its composition. Researchers tracking this timeline in the journal Microbiome observed subjects who consumed roughly 2 cups of kefir daily over a 4-week period. This visualization compares the subject's bacterial diversity. The baseline measurements are on the left, and on the right, the post-trial index shows an increase in microbial diversity by up to 25%. Within that newly expanded volume, populations of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium experienced notable growth. Clinical data associates these specific bacterial genera with improved nutrient absorption and a stronger mucosal immune defense. This shift in diversity introduces a new set of functional, biological capabilities to the body that were not present 30 days prior. By the 4-week mark, the focus shifts from the quantity of these new microbes to the specific chemical work they perform. As they digest fibers, they produce short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, with a heavy emphasis on a chemical byproduct called butyrate. This sustained increase in butyrate causes the tiny junctions between your colonocytes, the specific cells that line your intestines, to tighten. Simultaneously, the protective mucus layer coating that intestinal wall grows measurably thicker. These microscopic repairs are the required biological prerequisite for systemic benefits, transforming a fragile barrier into a fortified wall. In this model of a compromised cellular barrier, LPS molecules, harmful bacterial fragments, leak through gaps and drop into the bloodstream. The newly fortified wall closes these gaps. That constant leakage of bacterial fragments is a primary driver of low-grade chronic inflammation throughout the body. By blocking the toxic leakage at the source, the body's internal inflammatory response begins to cool. A series of studies from University College Cork confirmed this, showing consistent reductions in C-reactive protein levels in subjects after 4 weeks of daily kefir. C-reactive protein, or CRP, is one of clinical medicine's primary blood markers for tracking invisible internal inflammation. While kefir does not eliminate inflammation, dropping CRP levels suggests the protocol supports the body's natural capacity to regulate its internal fire. The gut operates as a hub in a vast network of chemical and neural pathways, projecting outward to connect with every major bodily system. The brain responds first. It maintains constant two-way communication with the intestines through the gut-brain axis, physically tethered by the vagus nerve. This anatomical diagram illustrates the body's serotonin distribution, showing that 90 to 95% of your total serotonin supply is manufactured in the intestines, not the brain. The factories manufacturing this chemical messenger are specialized enterochromaffin cells embedded within the intestinal lining. The rising SCFA levels and improved microbial diversity established in Act 1 directly stabilize the activity of those exact cells. Animal research published in the journal Cell demonstrated that germ-free mice produce 60% less serotonin than normal, but levels recovered entirely once a healthy microbiome was reintroduced. This neurochemical stabilization aligns with human clinical evidence linking daily fermented food consumption to measurable drops in perceived anxiety and improvements in self-reported mood. The second system to react is your immune architecture. Your gut houses a structure called gut-associated lymphoid tissue, or GALT, which contains roughly 70% of your entire immune system. GALT serves as a training ground. Immune cells are calibrated here through daily interactions with the incoming influx of kefir organisms. In this network pathway map, we can track the result of that training, a systemic boost in IgA antibody production, originating in the gut and dispersing outward to fortify distant mucosal surfaces, such as the respiratory tract. This does not prevent all infections, but these findings suggest the daily protocol provides a measurable upgrade to the body's frontline mucosal defenses, extending its influence from the gut to the lungs. The third system to respond is the skin, providing a visible external receipt of these internal biological shifts. Dermatologists track a physiological connection known as the gut-skin axis, where decreases in internal inflammation often mirror external skin improvements. A controlled trial published in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology found that subjects eating daily probiotic-rich fermented foods experienced statistically significant reductions in the severity of inflammatory skin flare-ups. Addressing skin conditions often requires starting from the inside out. Healthy skin is the visible result of internal microbial stability. By day 30, the daily kefir protocol yields a quieter immune system, a stable neurochemical environment, and healthier skin. Have you noticed changes in your digestion, energy levels, or skin after adding a fermented food to your routine? Let us know in the comments. But kefir is not a universal solution. For specific biological populations, daily consumption causes measurable harm. Adverse reactions are often wrongly dismissed as harmless adjustment symptoms, when they actually signal critical incompatibilities with an individual's unique biology. And there remains the unresolved mystery of the kefir grain, an ancient, living culture whose biological matrix contains genetic patterns defying complete scientific understanding. When you drink a glass of kefir, you are flooding a quiet biological ecosystem with a massive influx of billions of metabolically active microorganisms. This sudden arrival explains the most common early reaction: increased gas and abdominal bloating. Typically appearing within the first 3 to 7 days, this happens because these new microbes immediately begin fermenting the dietary fiber sitting in your colon. Gas is generated as a natural byproduct of this intense fermentation. But this initial disruption usually resolves within 7 to 14 days, once your gut microbiome adjusts to the new microbial input and the ecosystem settles into a new equilibrium. However, if that bloating persists beyond 2 weeks, it serves as a distinct warning sign. It often points to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, a condition where bacteria have colonized a section of the digestive tract they shouldn't normally dominate in large numbers. If you have a SIBO environment, adding live fermented organisms will temporarily amplify your symptoms rather than resolve them. In this scenario, your timing and dosage require careful clinical adjustments. The physical discomfort you might feel in those first few days is a diagnostic signal. It gives you real-time feedback on the current state and the structural boundaries of your unique microbiome. There is a secondary reaction that affects a smaller group of people. Many of the bacterial strains found in kefir, particularly lactobacillus species, produce histamine naturally as a metabolic byproduct of their fermentation. For most of the population, this extra histamine is handled quickly by an enzyme called diamine oxidase, or DAO. Your body uses DAO as a natural defense mechanism to break down dietary histamine before it can accumulate. But if you have reduced DAO activity, your body cannot clear the histamine fast enough. As it builds up, it causes headaches, skin flushing, nasal congestion, and digestive discomfort. Because of this intense metabolic output, individuals with severely compromised immune systems must consult a physician before introducing billions of live organisms into their bodies. Kefir is a potent biological tool. Because the product is alive, your underlying immune and enzymatic systems must be properly equipped to process what these organisms continuously produce. When choosing a type of kefir, the traditional dairy version consistently offers the richest and most diverse microbial profile. The lactose and casein naturally present in milk provide the ideal fuel source for the broadest range of these specific organisms. This creates a fascinating clinical paradox. Research shows that many individuals with formally diagnosed lactose intolerance can consume dairy kefir with surprisingly little issue. This happens because the bacteria within kefir pre-digest a significant portion of the milk's lactose during fermentation, before the liquid ever reaches your stomach. As these living organisms travel through your digestive tract, they actively continue to produce the enzyme beta-galactosidase, commonly known as lactase. This bar chart from the Journal of the American Dietetic Association illustrates the result. It compares the high frequency of severe digestive symptoms from drinking 236 milliliters of unfermented milk against the drastically lower symptom frequency of drinking the exact same volume of kefir. Dairy kefir acts as an active biological delivery system. It brings its own digestive enzymes along for the ride to solve the host's physical deficits. For individuals who truly cannot tolerate dairy in any form, water kefir provides a viable alternative. It successfully delivers living organisms that produce beneficial short-chain fatty acids and support overall gut diversity. Looking at this side-by-side comparison, we see a dense, highly varied cluster of microbial strains for dairy kefir on the left, next to a visibly sparser cluster for water kefir on the right. Fermenting in water yields a lower organism count and narrower strain variety. The choice of your base liquid dictates the scale, density, and diversity of the microbial army deployed into your gut ecosystem. To understand why these microbes are so effective, we have to look past the macroscopic effects in your gut and examine their extreme microscopic origin, the kefir grain itself. A single grain is not a random clump of bacteria and yeast stuck together by chance. It is a highly organized, three-dimensional living structure housing dozens of distinct microbial species. These species are bound together by a specialized structural matrix called kefiran. This polysaccharide matrix organizes the microbes so precisely that the entire grain functions like a miniature organ. This cross-section map reveals the grain's strict spatial organization. Specific species colonize the oxygen-rich outer surface, while different species embed deep in the anaerobic inner core. Across these zones, organisms exchange nutrients and share genetic material, coordinating activity through chemical signaling networks passing between layers. This level of structural organization resembles the highly coordinated behavior of a multicellular organism, far more than a simple collection of independent microbes. When scientists attempt to reconstruct a kefir grain by combining the exact same microbial species in a controlled laboratory, the organisms completely fail to self-assemble. The lab-grown microbes will successfully grow and ferment the liquid, but the crucial three-dimensional architecture and the kefiran matrix never emerge spontaneously. This presents an evolutionary mystery. Whatever unique environmental convergence or biological accident created the very first grain, modern science cannot replicate it from scratch. Every single kefir grain in existence today is a living artifact. It carries an unbroken biological lineage, continuously reproducing and being passed down across millennia. If you plan to introduce this lineage to your own body, the clinical literature points to a specific protocol. Start with half a cup or 118 milliliters per day for the first week, consumed with a meal, and then gradually increase to 1 full cup as your digestive system adjusts. Consuming kefir physically integrates one of the oldest continuously surviving symbiotic cultures known to science into a modern gut ecosystem starving for complexity.